The first item is threat protocols, Superintendent Gross.
All right. I thought we would just kind of go over some things related to safety. Obviously, an important topic affecting our district, and it's just that superintendent's conference last week, Monday, and sharing some woes a little bit. Some of my peers were like, "Yeah, you don't have the market cornered on that." A lot of districts are dealing with it. Although, I'll share a little bit later what we've learned from our training. So our district threat and emergency response team has continued to move forward, and I've gotten some good feedback from people, our staff, that they feel like we're prioritizing this in the sense that we have meetings every month. We have goals that we're working on, and these are the priorities for the year on this sheet here. The training plan for staff. We had all relevant staff go through CSTAG 2. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. We have radios. This is kind of like inventorying, the things that you just it's easy to sort of lose track of, but we have a lot of radios in our district. We have 800 megahertz that we use. They're capable of communicating with law enforcement. Pat was involved in that project. Then we also have smaller handhelds. It's over 100 of them that are used for kind of that teacher on the playground, para on the pickup island, kind of just, I don't want to say incidental, but things that are more emergent than a phone can do. To have at least one tabletop at each school site is on our list of things to do this year, specific to reunification. Develop a district website for our team, and also have some training videos on there. And we're in that process, we'll be creating space on there for some public facing information too, because I think that'll be a useful tool for us. And Sean is taking the lead on that one. We have teams assigned to all these. Alice is our program for active shooters. And, they're learning a lot about active shooter drills and really moving away from kind of that live reenactment, live training, because it ends up really creating all kinds of anxiety in kids and, making them very anxious about something that statistically, during the course of our CSTAG training, based on, and this is where it gets difficult, because like you for the places where this happens, it's very real and the statistics mean nothing. But when you look at the number of schools and children in America, it's like 1 in 6,000 1 in 6,000 schools it happens to. So like from a statistical standpoint, it's not a huge probability, but it's very real when it happens. So Alice is a program we use. Nav 360 is a piece of software that we use, and we're using it, probably at not necessarily a basement level, but maybe a first floor level, and it has about 15 floors. It's a very capable program of doing a lot. But so part of what we're working on this year is establishing one of those baseline implementation at each building. Like what, first it was, you need to make sure you have your plans uploaded in there and you're building maps, and establishing what the next thing that will leverage that tools for is one of the team's jobs. Part of that NAV 360 is a flip chart, and that is just like it's like a virtual set of one pagers. Like, what do you do if? So what if you do in a fire? That's one page on the flip chart. It's just digital instead of something you'd see hanging. And so ensuring that we have mental health protocols in there. And then something we've talked about as a group is, we have a number of items, or I'll call them crisis items, that we can train on. But from a statistics standpoint, it's much more likely, for instance, that Sean will have a kid choke, okay, a kindergartner, right? So making sure that the staff there know the choking protocols and where the dechoker is important. In 11th grade, choking is less likely, but that staff may need to know more about Narcan and vice versa. So where are we, being real smart about where we're spending our time with our staff. So we have training ongoing, but we also have 2 early outs a year, one coming up on the 16th of October where they'll work on some things as a building. So these are the priorities for our team this year. Digging into CSTAG a little bit, and this is all in your package here, but one of the things as we went through the threat that we had a few weeks ago that felt unfortunate is we've never been more prepared to handle or to react to that type of a situation in terms of our own training. So because we've prioritized that with this group over the last few years. And so this CSAG program, Comprehensive School Threat Assessment Guidelines, was developed in the wake of the Virginia Tech shooting. And they took a look at all kinds of data, shooting data, and determined a lot of things, and used the Secret Service documents that have been published as well, and determined that, as much efforts as there are to profile, that's really an ineffective way to approach safety. And so it's really more about looking at student behavior and being proactive that way rather than trying to come up with some profile of a kid, because there really isn't a profile that exists. So they've determined that this system is where schools use this, they're more safe. And you can see here sort of what some of the main things behind it. It's based on behavior, like I said, not profiling. There's a 5-step approach, which you can you'll see on the next page. It's based on a team, which if the last thing you want to be doing in the case of evaluating something very seriously is having this all fall on your shoulders or bias or whatever. So this team involves counselors, principals, mental health staff. Cree Larson has some crisis response team time and resources available to us to use, and our law enforcement partners as well that kind of get involved in that, as well as anybody that might be connected to the situation, the student, etc. And then ultimately results in the identification or determination of transient threats, which are threats that really maybe weren't even made. Substantive threats, which are the implications could be serious, but there isn't necessarily a path towards the execution of that threat. And then serious substantive, where this was in place, they made these threats, they actually had access to weapons, they had, and that's when things get really, really serious, really, really fast. And that's not what we had 2 weeks ago. That next slide shows the process, and it's a little bit small, but you can kind of see the 5-step process that our teams work through: evaluate, resolve, respond, do a safety evaluation. One of the things that I think is valuable about this process is that there is a considerable amount of effort put into safety planning and follow through. So it's not just we determined this and then this is the last time we talk about it. There are things that are put in place, whether that's morning check-ins every day and follow through with counselors and follow through with mental health and who's doing what and when. So that's a part of this process, maintaining contact and maintaining relationships. So we can continue to monitor situations. Some things as we went through the training, and again, we had in our district, I think it was around 80 people go through the first CSTAG training, and then the CSTAG 2 was a little bit smaller, but teams in every building went through the second phase. And they were pretty intense and long. I think the second training was about 8 hours. It was a full day. Statistically, and this is again where, I don't know, I don't necessarily even understand the word gaslighting, but I think this is probably where it might apply, where it's hard to talk about in some ways, but really statistically, schools are among the safest environments for children. Less than 1% of student or child deaths occur in schools. But again, that doesn't, it's hard to say that out loud without making it sound like you're minimizing it when it does happen. That's not it at all. There's actually been a decline of violent crime in schools, but there's a heightened perception of danger. And I think that's where this kind of yin and yang kind of comes, where even though they're statistically low risk, public perception of school safety has been affected by the preponderance of media. And so it seems like it's worse when the data doesn't necessarily support it. Our awareness of it is probably much, much higher. On the other hand, I think bullying and mental health has raised attention to new heights, and that is real. And I think that is something that we've seen increases of across the country, and it remains a considerable concern. And the other thing, kind of along with the Alice training comment, that there are some safety measures that we've put in place, other schools have put in place, and those have to be done carefully, because in some cases, those safety measures may improve safety marginally, but they also create anxiety. I think like metal detectors are a great example. You walk into a school with a metal detector, does that make you feel better or worse? I don't think it makes you feel better. I think it increases anxiety. So it's kind of an extreme example, but they have determined some of that as well. Any questions about CSTAG? I feel really good that we landed here, and I feel good about the energy and efforts we've put into this, because it is, it's part of being a school in 2024. It's kind of part of it.
Matt, do we have if I heard you correctly, we have a CSTAG group in every building?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so people are trained in every one of our buildings, and some of it's dependent on the particular threat that might be, they might be evaluating. It might not be the exact same team, but it's a team of people that's been through the training.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And also, if I heard you correctly, and from what I know, all staff have Alice training. Is that correct?
That's part of our every year work.
So there's a base level that
there's a base level. Yep. And I think that's something that we need to, constantly come back to, and also determine like what is that acceptable level of awareness that we need with that.
Good. Thank you.
So when we talk about statistics, and I know, nationally we talk about statistics, and 1 in 6,000 you said, and schools are relatively safe in that. And I get the point about, you talk about it, but I think it's important that we talk about it, and I'm not sure what the right words or the right venue is to talk about it. We deal with perception more than we deal with the reality side of it, right? That perception becomes that reality for those people. But I think it is important twofold here. One is, I think it's important to let the public know that what we have going here, right? That we are doing things to minimize risk within the schools. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important we communicate that out. The second thing is, I think it's important that we talk about schools are a safe place to be, even though that might be a hard conversation because of the gaslighting, because of what's out there on social media, and nothing against the media aspect of it, but it's a story, and they're going to tell the story, and it creates that perception that it's happening all over the place. But if we don't talk about how safe our schools are, that perception is going to override how safe the schools are. Does that make sense of what I'm saying? So my point is that I think we need to find some venues to go out in the public and talk about what we're doing to prevent or to have safety in the school. And our schools are relatively safe. Yes, we've had incidents, and I don't know what we have for statistics over the last 5 years as far as events go, but I think it's important maybe we pull some of that research, some of those statistics, and talk about what's actually happening in our backyard in relation to what's happening on a national level. And schools are relatively safe, right? And here's our data supporting that schools are safe. Does that make sense in what I'm saying?
Yes.
Communicating out. To me, it's creating an environment and a perception which is really reality, that schools are safe. And if we don't talk about it, the public will talk about it for us based on what they read on social media based on a news story that maybe happened last night or happened tomorrow night. Our schools aren't safe. I'm keeping my kids home from school today because of whatever.
Yeah, I think, school transportation and, I don't want to jinx anything, obviously, but, last year, our buses drove over 900,000 miles. We did not have a child get hurt in a bus accident. That's significant, and it's kind of like one of my kids last night was talking about how scared they are on airplanes and they feel unsafe. And I said, well, actually, statistically, airplanes fly millions and millions of miles a year and millions and millions and millions of passengers. And it's one of the safest ways you can get from A to B. But again, it's when we see the plane crash and, Sully doesn't have a river to land on. I mean, it's hard. But I do think you're right. I mean, we have 4,000 children and 500 plus people that congregate in our district buildings every day. And most of those days, that happens without incident. It's like at the size of a town. I mean, Chisholm is draw everybody. It's like everybody in Chisholm and, the surrounding area all coming to one place every day. They get here on our vehicles, they eat our food and come to our buildings and they get along. So.
My only caution with data is kind of three things. One, legally you can't study gun violence, so it's hard to get actual numbers on it. You legally can't study gun violence, right?
Sure.
So you can't get real numbers on it. Two, they're minors, so you won't often hear of incidents that don't hit the news. And then three, kids keep secrets. And so just be real cautious about what we consider safe, because safety is different.
Yep.
It creates its own different perspectives. So kids who have been bullied or other things would feel very different about that. And you might get some pretty visceral reactions from that. So just be cautious as you do it.
But I think our stats here, though, I think can tell a story in itself, right? And what I mean by stats is I'm referring back to the incident from a couple of weeks ago, right? I'm not saying bullying is not here. It's here. Obviously, mental health issues are here. And those are things we need to be talking about as well. But I think there was an added heightened awareness, if I shouldn't say awareness, gaslighting, if you will, based on the events that happened a couple of weeks ago. And that's not an everyday occurrence. I would say that's not even an every year occurrence, but perception is it's happening every day. And it's not. And I guess if we don't talk about that, they will continue to think it's happening every day.
What do you have to report to the Department of Ed?
We have a DERS report that we have to file, and it's based on, data that gets entered into campus, and it's mostly physical violence, suspensions. I'm sure you had to fill out that report for me back in the day. Yeah, we do have to file that every year.
But that could be an indicator.
Right.
I think you're moving into communication, and I think that's Pat's point, and I think that's Melissa's point. How can we more effectively communicate? And I know that you've been very good at communicating, but message sent and message heard are not always the same.
That's very true.
We had some statistics from the Grand Rapids Police Department, right? The calls or whatever. I mean, those are our stats.
Within the school, yeah.
It'd just be interesting to compare year to year or whatever.
I think one of the things you can talk about to the public, though, is the training that we give staff. And I think that's very reassuring. And I think it's a pretty comprehensive effort overall. And I think that could be communicated. I think one of the other points to remember is that we've always had a very close relationship with our law enforcement agencies, and that the collaboration between the PD and the SO has just been incredibly good.
That's true. And I think that's another talking point, right? The collaboration, the working relationship. And to me, it's not a one and done. It's every time you have an opportunity, you talk about it, right? And that brings reassurance. That brings, geez, things are really good here, you know, things are safe here and that.
I think when law enforcement's involved, creating a joint statement is good. Because you
Yeah.
involve them throughout the whole, they're involved in the whole process anyway.
Yeah.
And they put out their own statement. If it's a joint statement, that they can agree on it.
Yeah. And we didn't make it clear this last time. I mean, you know, you do this kind of after action. We didn't make it clear that we were working as closely with them as we were. And that was a misstep, you know.
Yeah, just as one of those things, and because I think even with a missing SRO, it didn't change how that process went,
Mhm.
which is what it, but making the process visible
Right.
is.
That's, yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's a good word for it. In that kind of talking about process, this is one of the things that we're thinking about, and visibility. How we handle this, how do we handle threats when we get them? And this kind of comes from some procedures that we're working on as an admin team to land on. And this is, you know, it's one of those things where in some cases you just move through this and don't take the time to write it down, or it just is a natural part of how you do things, but writing it down enables you to make it visible. And I think there's some reassurance. I mean, I get some feedback from parents that was like, we just wanted some reassurance. I'm like, huh.
Yeah.
Right. That's great.
Right.
That's super
Yeah.
good feedback. And where we wanted more reassurance. So that's good feedback. And I think some of this would help, but securing that environment right away. And this is where it gets a little bit hard for parents that sometimes wanted information earlier than we were able to do that, because really it's about securing that environment, maintaining the integrity of the investigation, communicating with the people that we can as soon as we can, and then moving through that assessment process, you know, and then communicating with parents once we're in that spot where we know something that's useful, we've taken care of what we needed to take care of, and then get to that safety planning. The other thing that we've found to be helpful is to have a briefing or debriefing, depending on with staff, that because they have questions, they hear from kids, they hear from parents, and it's not a good spot for them to be, to have less information than you know their neighbor does when they're living right in it. So that's been very appreciated when we've done a good job of that, and something we just want to make sure we're calling out and remembering to do every time.
So what's the process? So let's say I'm a parent, and what's the process when a kid was kind of bullied in the sense that they were put out as if they were a threat, but they were never a threat? Like, how do we deal with that? Because now the kid, right, information gets out that this kid was a threat to the school, but they never were. It was actually somebody bullying them, or
Right.
some, you know, who turns it, you know, so it was almost a reverse.
Mhm.
Like, how do we deal with that in that sense? I mean, that's the other piece, like parents want to know, but the
Mhm.
reality is if it was their kids, they don't want everybody to know either.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I'm just asking the question because I think we've historically had some incidents similar to that. So just false reporting.
Yeah, and that one of the things we ran into in this incident was, or one of the incidents is that there was personally identifiable information getting put out there by families about minors that wasn't true. And it wasn't happening during school, it was happening,
Right.
you know, and so our ability to control meta or police that or is really hard. Now, did we make some phone calls to parents and say, hey, look, this is really not okay? Yeah, that happened. We don't have any ability to really to force them to take something down off their personal account. So that's where it gets really, really hard. I mean, that's where it gets really, really hard.
I think what we can do, Matt, is put out as much information as we can without jeopardizing
Yeah.
it. If there's a criminal investigation, whatever, and obviously the names and all that we can't, but try to be more proactive than reactive, if that
Mhm.
makes sense.
Yeah.
And I know there's a fine line there. And if we could do that, being unified with the city and whoever else needs to be at that when we put that information out, so that they're not shopping.
Mhm.
Well, we're gonna go to the
Yeah.
superintendent first, and then we're gonna go to the police chief. And, I know the officer that worked on it, we're gonna go to the officer then too, And I think if there could be a united front up front where the players are there and they're all putting the information out in unison.
Yeah.
I think it makes a big difference.
Is there a statement that legal could make around slanderous statements in relation to minors? Like just at the bottom of something to be like, almost kind of a warning,
Yeah.
like that, and maybe it's the PD that puts it up. I don't know.
Mhm.
But it feels like, it's not just like I'm saying something bad about somebody. I'm being slanderous.
Mhm.
And that's gonna hurt that kid
Right.
for the rest of his life
Right.
here, right? I mean, if you're that child, it's like, I don't want to go to school. Why do I want to go to school? You're gonna
Right.
tell me I'm safe? I'm not safe.
Mhm. Right.
You ran this
Yeah.
process on me and I didn't have anything to do with it.
Mhm.
Like, I don't beat my wife anymore.
Yeah, I mean, there's just something that, a reminder.
Mhm.
There's a fine line there,
Mhm.
legally fine line.
That's what I'm saying. It would
Yeah.
have to be a legal statement
Mhm.
coming out of that. We do not share minor names and information. I mean, there can be a legal piece on that.
And obviously we can't, right? And I think you can quote a statute to that.
Mhm.
Right.
Back to your point,
Right.
right? And
Right.
give them the statute, let them go look it up, and then they can formulate an opinion on whatever it is based on that statute.
Right.
Mhm. Yeah. And sometimes it's a little bit of a moving target. It was this time.
It was, yeah, for sure.
There's the potential to be able to talk with more specifics if personally identifiable information hasn't been created in the community. And that's what we ran into this time. So what we could have shared was even limited by that. So it's sure tricky, but yeah, it's tricky. Yeah. In terms of communication relative to safety, our first priority is the immediate safety of students and staff. And so all of our communication is going to run through that filter. We're not going to say anything unless or until we know that it's not going to, create an unsafe environment. The working closely with law enforcement, that's something we've historically done. We kind of had to get, it's a new school year and had to sort of circle back to that a little bit. And our, Chief Morgan did a really good job of reaching out to make sure that we were on the same page there, because you kind of get in the middle of it sometimes and it's like, oh yeah, we have to make sure we're doing that. So that's important. So we talked about data practices, and I said, at the bottom, I think constantly seeking to learn and improve. And I've thought a lot about the timing of the message. When does it go out? Is it when people might be available or not at work so they can actually access it? Or late at night was maybe too late for some people to make decisions or ask questions they want answers to. So finding that right time is tough, but important. Having as much in the message as we can and still make sure we're maintaining the integrity and the privacy that we need to. And then also, how are we sending that message out? Is it an email? Is it a call? Is it both? What's the best mechanism or mechanisms or approach to do that? So those are all things that we have to learn from and learn about. All the while, hoping that we don't get excellent at it. Because if we get excellent at it means we're doing it a lot. But that's tongue in cheek, obviously. But so those are all things that we've been reflecting on. Any thoughts or questions on any of that? The Facebook Live we had scheduled. I mean, it was not a pop-up one. The timing of that was good. And I think that was probably helpful. I think there were like 15,000 views on that thing.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then the average time was like 2.5 minutes, so they weren't watching the whole thing, but
No, they're just getting it.
yeah,
Yeah. Good.
so.
I
That
think
was
what's
good.
important with Facebook Live, Matt, it's more of a personal touch
Mhm.
than an email or a text or a phone call, right? And they have an avenue to ask a question if they so
Mhm.
choose. I would just say if there is an event like this again, I think Facebook Live is a good way to communicate. When is it appropriate time? I don't know, based on the circumstances, but again, back to having the team, if you will, wherever that team needs to be, whether it's law enforcement, you principal, or you law enforcement, whatever. Again, I think that's important because it brings it to a level of almost that personal touch where you're reaching out and saying, David, Marty, we're talking to you, in that. And I think that brings comfort and reassurance to people that I watch Facebook Live, right? And I heard what he said. Not what I read on Facebook. I heard what the principal or the chief or whoever said, and I think that carries a lot of weight going forward. And it can be a good message carrier as well.
Yeah.
The person that's for people.
And I would just say an incident that rise to that level, having you as the point of communication is important. Because they know that it's risen to that
Mhm.
level
Sure.
and the leadership in the school is paying attention. The top dog is watching. Not that the others don't have a role, but just when it rises to that, it feels better as a parent when it comes to this.
It's a good point.
And then set up a specific school, have that principal there with you at Facebook Live,
Mhm,
right?
for
So again,
sure.
it brings that personal touch to the
Sure.
school then with the principal there.
And acknowledges their own leadership
Mhm.
in the
Mhm.
process.
Right. Okay. So yeah, I didn't, I'm probably behind on my things here. Oh yeah, okay. I did, so there's some procedures I forgot to mention here that we're putting together. One is investigation procedures. Again, as a principal, you do these all the time and you kind of, but if you haven't done one in 8 months, it's sort of easy. So we're trying to just put it together, a playbook. It's sort of like, oh yeah, okay. That's right. I should make sure and do this and take the pictures of this physical evidence and also the report, creating a consistent report for an investigation. So we've got all of our I's dotted and T's crossed, and obviously that not only helps continuity from what we create, what we produce, but also if it comes to the point where there's something that's challenged, we can feel really good about what we did. So I think this is going to be really good. Again, it's not something we do all the time, but I think it will be a really good tool for principals to be able to go to and go, okay, I can kind of work through that.
I would suggest, Matt, that at least annually sit down and take a look at this, and then you can say it was looked at on an annual
Sure.
basis. There needs to be some adjustments wherever, or even after if there's an event, does there need to be adjustments on it? But I think let's still make it, put in a book and put it on a shelf and collect dust, right?
Yeah.
Let's pull it off and take a look at it, and
Mhm.
people come and people go, right? And we want to make sure the new people that
Yeah.
are coming in are aware of processes going forward in that.
That's a good point. Okay, communication update then. Just some things that we've been working on, and I was going through this, is like, holy cow. Again, this is all without a communications person. And we all know, I think that, that would be great. We don't have the luxury of that right now. So I guess probably the first thing I want to just do is acknowledge Lauren Still and Melanie from Community Ed. They're doing a great job of carrying water. Julie's doing an incredible job of, picking up a lot of this. I'm picking up some. I mean, it's been a real team effort to make this happen. Our connection with Colin from Mounds View has been really, really helpful. So it's been a lot, but it's been good. So this newsletter, first of all, came out of our communications plan. And that was part of the audit that Colin did. And he was like, hey, a lot of people said this was important. And a lot of people that aren't connected to your school with kids or grandkids or whatever, this is how they were getting information. And in some areas of the state, printed newsletter might not be the most effective tool. In your district, it is. It's an effective tool. So this is coming out in late October. We've got some information in there about each school. We kind of do some highlights of some different programs, talk about finance. Our overall goal with our information is to build trust and confidence. That's what the purpose of all the communication we're doing really is. One of the things we haven't talked about enough, but we're kind of putting in here. And the caveat is our scores aren't where we want them to be. We were above the state in reading and math, and we were above every one of our neighboring school districts in reading and math on 2024 MCAs. That's not a statement we should shy away from. We have work to do, and we'll continue to do that work, but that's data that's backed by fact, or a fact that's backed by data, however we want to frame it. So this is coming out. I think we're on our fourth draft. Colin's been very helpful. Lauren's done a good job of kind of stitching this together. We've had a number of meetings to work through this, and so I'm looking forward to that going out. That will go out to all addresses in the district.
Awesome.
Community outreach for this year. Julie's been doing a lot of hunting down of groups that are currently out there. So for instance, the Association of Itasca County Townships, scheduling me to get with them. So if you have a group that we haven't thought of, maybe just shoot that to Julie. And so we're trying to get to the townships individually that are interested, trying to get to other groups that are interested. This isn't a sales pitch. I'm not pitching a referendum here. This is just, hey, here's what's going on in your school district, in our school district. So that's happening. We've got some scheduled, I think, even yet for this month. So working on that. And if you're interested in knowing when those are, so you could attend, I'd say just touch base with Julie. A lot of work around our strategic directions. And so first of all, our website, and Julie, I don't know if you've been there yet as a board member, but if you click on that image, Julie, again, Lauren and Melanie did a really good job of this. So under administration, you scroll down, you'll see strategic directions. And so this gives a little bit of background on the left, going back to the feedback we got from our community. And again, that was 700 surveys returned, staff meetings in every building, interviews with current and former students, focus groups geographically all over the place. So that's what ultimately led to the report that we got from Ed and Laura, and the synthesis of that, creating these 6 strategic directions. We've talked about those a million times. What you maybe haven't seen is this. And if you click on one of those, like equitable education, it launches you into a section just on that and kind of expands that. Equitable education is sort of like the abbreviation for equitable access, representation, and outcomes. It starts by talking about why we think this is important and what it looks like when we're winning. And then if you go down, Julie, scroll down a little bit on that page. It kind of lays out our operational plan objectives that are tied to that. And I just met with our kind of a strategy team last week to update some of these. Some of these need to be changed already. We've gotten some of these done and need to refine them. So, this is a living document. We knew that operational plan or strategic directions aren't going to change, but that operational plan will. And then if you scroll down a little bit more, we've started to just document some evidence of progress. There's progress being made on this, and here's kind of what here's what that looks like. So every one of those wedges has an expansion. You can blow that up and take a look at that. So that was I'm really proud of that, and I think again, trying to be visible. I don't know how many people will go to that, but I don't know.
It's there.
It's there. And I do think, and I'm, Angie's over here. I've said in my 3-2-1 Thursday emails that when people are sick of hearing me talk about it, that it probably means I'm about there. and I'm probably getting close to that. I don't know, but I will share, and maybe you saw in the one I sent last week. I was at the high school. I saw a copy of this athletic tape to the door of our locker room, and I thought, that is good. That's what we're talking about right there, right? It's getting in. So I was really, really excited about that. So this is one way we're working on communicating strategic directions out. Another one is a video that we're creating. So this is in production right now. And it kind of goes through each wedge again. We've got voices from all over our district sharing, here's why this is important. Here's what we're doing. And just another way to communicate how this came about, why it's important. So again, that this, for me personally, goes back to 2020 when I heard we needed some clarity about what we're working on. It should be clear that we're working on these 6 things. Let's see, informational campaign. We're working with Dan Connolly locally. He does a lot of work in video too. He's creating some video for us or some footage for us that just highlights our video or highlights our district. Why would someone choose to come here? What does small community kind of feel, big time opportunities? What does that look like? And so really capturing that story. He's got some great ideas. It's fun to be around creative people like that because they just, it just kind of flows out of them. So I get excited talking about our schools. I think there's a lot of reasons to be proud, and we need to tell that story. So that's in the works. 321 Thursdays, I've mentioned that. I'm just taking that as an opportunity to make sure that, share 3 things that I think people need to know, 2 things that that I've observed that make me proud to carry the banner for our district, and then a note of gratitude. And those have been fun to do so far. If by March, maybe I'll be running out of material, but so far I've gotten good feedback from people. Trying to make them readable in less than 5 minutes, and so far we're good.
So well done.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, there.
Good, thank you. Good. The logo and the name, we've worked through that name piece. I think that's just sort of happened. I had a conversation with a couple local people to update our trees and water. It's very reasonable to work when you work locally. So we'll see where that ends up. I think there seems to be some interest in creating some sort of connection to our high school mascots, because that's how a lot of our community connects to our schools. There's the Big Fork one. Big Fork kids just selected they voted on their kind of one of their landscape views of their logo just last week. So that's really cool. And so we've got 2 legal logos now.
Can you just put the husky in the tree and then like hawk flying over?
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's what it'll be. I don't know.
There and the
Yeah.
flying.
Maybe that's what it'll be. I don't know. I'll leave that to the professionals. But yeah.
Put that, don't take that.
Don't do that? Oh, okay. Yeah, well, like that right there. We can just like put the
Throw it,
the husky right on the shore, and
Yep.
sound effects of the hawk flying over, and it's like it's an interactive logo.
A little thunder in there, it'll be
Yeah, some
great.
thunder. Well, yeah, that's good. Got it all covered. Rapids Radio, we have been working with them on a couple projects. One is some radio ads. We had some staff in recording those last week. Again, it's about trust and confidence, about the themes that we're after, some appearances or shows. They've been good about inviting me in and others in, so we'll continue to do that. And then also moving into a space that I'm not that familiar with, which is digital impressions. And this is, again, just a way to get our school district in front of people. One of the things that last November told me very, very clearly was that our community needed more information. So this is all a response to that. How do we make sure that they get the information that they need? So those are kind of the highlights on the communication side.
Is there a point to adding, KAXE? Public radio?
Yeah, but it's a good point. I can reach out to them and see what they're interested in
I
doing.
think they
too.
would be amenable to that, and I
Yeah.
think there's a group that listens to KAXE.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. They've been super cooperative with everything we've done too, so, I'll reach out to them.
I don't know what the video is with Connolly, but Megan Christensen spent hours and hours and hours of video footage with around the area. And I know she said, like, if somebody needs it or
Hmm.
somebody has a need to talk to her, she's with Visit Grand Rapids, and they did. I mean,
Did Wise Guys shoot that for them? Do
you
you know?
know, they brought in some big,
Somebody else?
Yeah.
Okay. So
and
she
it's
might
there,
have
and
some.
you know, she used pieces of it, but
Yep.
there's just hours and hours of footage that might
So like B-roll stuff?
that might be useful.
Mhm.
And she would know, or maybe not,
Yeah.
but I know that she has a whole.
Okay, that's super helpful. Yeah. Okay, those are the two items I had, Mr. Chair, and certainly open to any questions or comments or other suggestions. I got a few notes here and some to-dos.
Questions or comments?
Good job.
I appreciate the attention to
Yeah.
communication.
Good update.
I'd just say what's hard with it, Matt, is it's, as I said earlier, it's not a one and done, it's a continuation of doing it. And even though it might get old on the district side, there's people out there.
It'll be the first time they heard it.
Yeah, and that's the unfortunate thing. And the second part of that is that there's so many venues on how to communicate to. Now it's almost as if you got to try to hit them all because everybody gets their information from, whether it still be newspaper, whether it be radio, whether it be social media, whether it be the neighbor, you know, it just. And the third thing I'd say is the more personal touch we can get to it, actually physically getting in front of people, it carries a lot more weight.
In the newsletter, people still get most of their information. It's through the mail. Because I've been in conferences where they say that mail's still the number one way people get information. So the newsletter will be good. On to everyone's house.
I think the biggest barrier so far to our community meetings has been just scheduling. I mean, they've been pretty receptive for the most part. Wouldn't you say, Julie?
Very receptive. Ironically, many of them are held on Mondays.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a ton of
Yeah,
board
no.
meetings on Mondays, yeah.
So that's been a little bit of a challenge, but.
Yeah.
We'll get through it.
Any other business?
Thank you.
In relation to that, I know I'm not gonna be around after December, but maybe it's exception to the rule and change our board meeting date to something different that would accommodate somebody attending these
Sure.
meetings that are held on Monday to make that connection out there. There will never
Are
be
you
a perfect
suggesting
date.
that we change our meeting date from Mondays, Pat? Oh my gosh.
No, he's
Radical.
leaving.
I know, he's
Yeah,
like-
he's
like-
leaving.
I think
Radical.
that you should change it.
Yeah.
Maybe 7 a.m. on
Maybe-
Monday.
Well, I won't tell you I'll be advocating for 5 meetings in Big Fork.
He misses both of them. So question is, did you guys see on the news, public schools in the Twin Cities and some of the suburbs were out protesting the end of COVID dollars because
Yes.
of the
Oh.
implementation that they got to do around reading, writing, and arts.
Yes.
And that by taking that away, there are programs that they've started up that will no longer be accessible to students. And again, same thing. Reading was going up, math was going up, and art was accessible. I just thought that was really interesting that was,
Well, the pitch that I got out of it is that they were looking for some more federal money.
oh, for sure.
Yeah.
That was the point. But I just thought that was really,
Mhm.
that was quite interesting because
But they have referendums too.
Yeah.
If the feds would just honor their commitment to special ed, it would basically fill that
We'd be out of that.
gap, you know?
Yeah.
So speaking of that, and I know it's probably way beyond us, but I'm going back to our conversation with Representative Stauber up in Big Fork of there's no appropriation for it. It's in law, but there's no appropriation for it. What can we do to help facilitate and push that for appropriation for it. So we get our 40%.
Our legislators?
Hmm.
Can we talk to our legislators? I mean, can't he do something?
He said he's working on it. That's what he said, right?
He did, he did. Well, that's all.
Concepts.
Meetings adjourned.
Thank you. Good job.